Les Barnwell, L-A-S-B-A-R-N-W-E-L-L.
And how old were you during the 1964 flood?
12.
Okay, if I could have you say complete sentences, I was 12 years old during the 1964 flood.
I was 12 years old in the 1964 flood.
Okay, so you were going to school then.
Yes.
Where at?
Bridgeville.
Bridgeville
Elementary,
School?
yes.
Okay. And what are your memories of the 1964 flood?
Well, one had to do with the school. It was after the flood when we had so much snow, and the National Guard and Army helicopters were, or whatever they were saving people in the hills because of the snow and maybe feeding some cows. And our neighbor, Betty Hunt, came down with a suitcase and a .243 rifle over her shoulder, trying to hitch a ride into their isolated Ackley Ranch, where she would be taking care of the cows throughout the duration. And I just remember that they just had fits about letting her on the helicopters with a rifle. And they were also bringing everyone out, so they didn't want to take somebody in. But she finally talked her way into it and went out and spent the duration at their ranch.
That's funny to be wanting to get into, an area that's isolated and cut off from everybody when everybody else is trying to get out. So I imagine they were just, like, why would you want to do that? She sounds like she got her way. She must be a pretty tough person.
Just like my mom.
Your mom gets her way.
Yes.
I imagine so. Yeah. So, so you were going to school, and you remember these helicopters coming overhead?
Yeah, actually, we're using the school ground for a landing area, for a staging area.
Oh, okay. That seems like a good wide open place for them to have easy access to. That's
yes,
pretty safe for them to go in and out of. Were they distributing any sort of food to some of those areas?
I was 12. Lots was going on. Betty Hunt was the focus of my attention on that aspect.
Yeah, I imagine she's kind of like, what is it, Annie Oakley, this like
That
strong...
would be the impression you would get, yes.
Okay. And so you have that memory of that, and that was because there was snow after the flood.
Yes.
So there was a lot of rain, like in December, or late December, like the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, probably just rain like crazy here.
There was a lot of rain all of November, saturating the ground and leading up to this event. And then it turned cold at the end, and the snow came and shut everything off.
But by then the flood had already happened.
Yeah, the flood, it was January after the flood. We were back in school. So
it's funny, a lot of people, their memories of the flood were, well, I didn't have to go to school. That's what I remember. Yeah.
So, as my mother said, we went to Larrabee to clean things up, if I can.
Sure.
Anyway, we went there to help a neighbor, Bill Rice, had bought my aunt and uncle's place at Larrabee, and it was badly flooded, and he had a small cat he was going to take down there to do cleanup work. And he got over the hill through the snow and got his small cat stuck way down there somewhere. So we took one of our D7s down, and helped him out and parked it there, and later on found that PL had absconded with it to use, commandeered it, I should say, to use in the cleanup efforts at Larrabee. We wound up taking our second D7 down there and building dikes around a big D8 with the 10 or 12 inch stack that was just full of sediment because they couldn't move it. There's quite a story to that. We built a dike around it. It was brand new. They hadn't even used it yet, I don't think. And we built a dike around the Larrabee Lodge, and I remember being in the Larrabee Lodge in their big open room with a loft around most of it, inside most of it. There's a podium there with the big old registry book, which has since disappeared, turned to the page that had Teddy Roosevelt's signature on it. He'd stayed there on hunting excursions here on Chalk Mountain. And I kicked up a silver teapot out of the mud there on the second or third story loft floor. And we also cleared up all the roads for the county, and they would fly us fuel drums with helicopters because there was nothing going on that side of the river except for us, I guess. And the county ended up paying the bill. That's
But
what
wait
my
a minute,
grandpa
you
always
as a
said.
12-year-old kid got to run a cat.
That's right.
So tell me about that.
Well, they were. It was a lot of every boy's dream, you know. Here you are pushing mud and all around, an old cable blade cat, and clearing the roads to the river, like my mother says, so that people could run the ferry boat back and forth from homes, or the boats back and forth. But yeah, it was an adventure, an unforgettable adventure. The chained up jeeps going back and forth through the deep snow to get there every day, freezing cold. So big lunch fires and so forth. And anyway, it was quite an adventure.
Great, great. So what do you think about the idea about the self-reliant people in Humboldt County and people who are able to work with their hands and really able to kind of, you know, get things together after a flood, kind of being different from people who live in a city and are affected by a disaster?
Well, certainly everyone improvises, very good at improvising. I found that out when I went in the Marine Corps. Most people, if they didn't have the manual in front of them, they couldn't do anything. So yeah, you know, back in those days, a lot of the affected people were agriculture and hard-working class people that had to improvise for their lives anyway. So yes, I think that they probably recovered and handled it better than most. I'm not sure what today's Humboldt County would be like with the same disaster.
I don't know either. I think it's going to be different, but I mean, I think eventually we'll have another flood. I don't know that it'll be of that magnitude during my lifetime, but
I am of the opinion that we should never have a flood of that caliber again, because if you look now, our forestry practices have changed and we're completely reforested almost everywhere. Very few clear cuts or very few naked clear cuts. In the '64 flood, they were right after the peak of the timber industry, where everything had been clear cut, which is, by the way, the state wanted it done. Just so you know, up until 1973, the state's policy was to clear cut and burn and make grazing land, pasture land out of everything. So it's not necessarily the people's fault. But also the '55 flood was in the middle of the timber industry's clear cuts. So I think that those two major floods would probably never be repeated again. The canopies and the vegetation would divide the flow up better.
okay. Very good. Thanks, Les. That was great.
Les, I wanted to ask you, is there a road from
Here to Larrabee?
over to Larrabee?
Yes.
Oh, there
About
is.
11
Some AAA maps have it.
Uh-huh.
Would you say 11 miles
Yeah.
to Larrabee?
Oh,
And
yes.
but it is not. It's all private.
Right.
Some AAA maps have it. We've had motorhomes drive up that wanted to drive
my
through it.
God.
Certainly isn't usable. The last time I sent fire trucks that way for the forestry, they knocked all their lights off under the bumpers and everything because PL got into making such bodacious water bars that they ruined any.
Regulations.
They made it impossible to traverse the road, more or less.
Huh.
So
That's interesting.
So that's how you got those cats over there?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
I was wondering, I didn't think there was a road from here. I thought it was a pretty steep canyon from there.
I have an intricate, extensive road system on this ranch, and of course it connects to one or two of them from PL like that, which would allow us to go that way. In fact, when I was young, some of my first memories are our mother following my dad with the tractor, with the mowing machine on it, the little Ford tractor with the mowing machine. They would cut hay on my aunt and uncle's place down there and at Camp Grant, and they would run the tractor and some of the other things down this Pacific Lumber Company road. And from the top of the mountain out here at the lodge, there's an upper lodge up there, which is a nice building and barn that the hippies have ruined now. But the switchback road down through the open country, and we'd be driving on one and watching Dad go this way, and driving on the next and watching him go that way. And as a little kid, that was a big memory for me. That's always stuck in my mind.
seems
So-
like, it's good to have a good road system in case you have fire out here too. You don't worry about.
This is
fires
Humboldt
and-
County. I have never seen a fire to speak of that was really major. There were some early on, I suppose, but not in my lifetime.
Okay,
So
alrighty.
I try to burn all the time, but I can never get a burn day, or the
Yeah.
state put a moratorium in January. They wouldn't let me burn.
Unless we try, yeah.
So
Well,
What if I
Great.
could ask one?
Oh, sure.
Unless you keep looking at Jennifer.
Oh.
Yes.
I know you've already said a bit about this as far as like the country versus the rural and how self-sufficient. So what do you think would have happened as far as the people who were rescued by the people who were here before they got some outside help? What do you think would have been the outcome as far as like if that had happened and people were like waiting for FEMA to show up, waiting for the carrier to come with the helicopters? I mean, people came out with their own boats and helped a lot of people. What do you think would have been?
well, certainly they saved my grandparents because the house collapsed and it stayed there, but it twisted and would have been got clear under the water. It just humble. I mean, people's nature. I think when you live in the country, to help your neighbor and jump right out there and do what you can to help anyone.
Yeah, and I think you're like, did you get?
I
what-
I
yeah,
think it's
okay,
a little
good.
different than the Washington slide. You know, you can't help many people there. There aren't many people left to help. But I'm certain that the neighbors went right in and did what they could for anyone. So.